Okay, here we are. So we're looking at another podcast. This is hopefully reasonably timely if you're listening to this at the right time of year. If you listen to this when you come out, it should be just about, or nearly to be, or has been for a few days, Lent.
Yeah.
So we thought we'd talk about Lent.
Now, I have to say, James, growing up in my formative years as a good enough conformist, not having with the whole yes, just with the Anglican system, I kind of, when I first came to St. Albans, Lent was like a probably thing for me. Okay. And I have to confess, I still don't really quite understand it, or what's it, or other than sort of vague notions of giving up chocolate or whatever.
Yes.
I honestly did really, genuinely understand it.
Was there nothing? Was there no pancake day or?
Well, we have.
Yeah, but you don't necessarily need to know when that is.
No, it's all about, for me, it was, where's the Jif lemon and the golden syrup?
Yeah.
What's other fillings are available?
Like, see, let's not go down. But
That could be
we'll never get to that. If we start to use, I'm sorry, golden syrups.
So I think it really was a new thing for me. What's all this Lent belong?
Okay.
Suddenly there's Lent courses.
Yeah.
I admit to still being somewhat mystified by the whole topic. Maybe the only person who can.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think in the time I've been here, it's quite a while now, I think we've done more with it some years than others. So I think sometimes we've done a bit with it, sometimes it's not like we've never ignored it, we haven't necessarily made a big thing of it. It's a movable feast, quite literally, as in it doesn't always start on the same day. I mean, then that is one of the things why I think sometimes Lent goes missing, because everyone knows when Christmas Day is.
Yes.
Whereas Lent is a certain number of weeks before Easter.
And Easter moves
around. So Lent moves around. So, it's not impossible to sort of ask you the questions, when is Lent?
And the reason why it moves around is because it is connected, because the Gospels tell us when it happened. When Easter happens in the Jewish Passover, and we know what Jewish Passover is. Yeah. And so Easter now, Jewish Passover, is still
related.
Well, or still happens at the same time.
Related.
Do they not start on the same time?
I get lost. The dating of Easter has been a source of controversy in the church.
Yes.
Let's just say the two are related. There's something about when you celebrate it. I still get lost when I try and understand.
Yes.
The arcane disputes of the 6th and 7th century about Easter, but it's definitely related to Passover. So and therefore, because Passover moves around related to moons, it's ultimately related to the lunar cycle, which obviously is slightly different than the annual cycle, and therefore it shifts around. And it can shift around by up to a month.
Yes.
So Easter can be early 20s March all the way through to about the 20th April. It's quite a big difference. Which of course on the lunar cycle it will be, won't it? It's just when the moon's come. So that's why Lent shifts around.
Yeah.
So you can be starting Lent in first week of February, and that has a certain feel about it. Or you can be starting Lent towards the end of February to March. That has a different feel.
And so, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but as it is with anything within the church calendar, there were practices. So there are practices that are not prescribed in the New Testament, but developed early, and then there's periods of time in which those practices are attempted to be unified in some degree. So, for example, there would have been always a time where it would have been like, okay, let's remember the birth of Christ.
Yeah.
Let's remember, we can get onto Lent in terms of the 40 days in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Let's remember those things. And there's a practice in which it happens, but the church is obviously growing all over the place. And so the practices may vary, and there's an attempt in which it's going, as it makes sense, of going, we should all do this somewhat at the same time.
Yeah, and of course then on top of that you get what are considered to be abuses, misuse.
Yes.
And therefore, obviously, when that happens, the reaction against it is to tend to do what your experience would be, is to say, well, actually, this whole Lenten stuff has been more unhelpful than helpful, so let's just stop it.
Yes.
And I can sympathise with that in the sense that, occasionally people will say, I'm giving up chocolate for Lent. And I'm honestly always inclined to say, well, what's the point of that? I mean, what is the point of that? Why? Why are you doing that? Because I'm much more interested in
That
why you're doing that than what do you think you're achieving?
Yeah, it just becomes a bit ritualistic.
Well, it does. It can be, and also just why there's a long association between Lent and fasting. The association between Lent and fasting is that association you mentioned that you can view Lent, and this always with stuff that's been around for 2,000 years. There's quite a lot of ways you can view it. You can view Lent as a remembrance of that time of Jesus in the wilderness,
which is what's called 40 days.
40 days, which is that period of preparation, and just as Jesus fasted, so we fast, and feast days as well, and you work out exactly how that works. So I get where the origin stuff, but most of the people telling me they give chocolate, but no idea what explanation. They're not giving up chocolate because of any reason to do with Jesus. And therefore that's the whole sort of, on the one side you've got this, do I even want to do Lent? Because I've got to spend so much time dealing with the stuff that's a bit unhelpful about it. Or do I want to do it? Because actually there is something about, and you were talking about this in church the other day, there's something about preparation for a feast. And that actually do your fasting first, before you, on the run up to it, not when you look at your waistline after the feast.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? That's miserable. The preparation time, you prepare for Christmas. Talk about Christmas when you're Advent, you prepare with a time of fasting. Because a time of fasting is a time of preparation for big events. And therefore Lent is one of those periods. So people will know, what will people know about Lent? People will know about Pancake Day.
Yeah.
Which is Shrove Tuesday.
Because that was using stuff up.
Yes, that's it, you do know. I've never really understood why using everything, all like certain products, ends up making pancakes.
Yeah.
But let's not detail. Or why particularly you need to use up lemons and sugar. But there we go.
Yeah, lemons on that. I didn't put in, maybe it's the luxury, I don't know.
Different child, I think.
Yeah.
Don't forget the pancakes with Drift Lemon Day.
Yeah. Oh, he's put it on his life. Have you ever seen a Jiff Lemon?
I do, yeah.
That's
But do you want me to never at any point is it treated as a real treat?
pancakes.
No, the lemon.
Oh, I like lemon sugar pancakes. So you have to choose with people might have heard of Ash Wednesday.
Again, that was new to me.
So Ash Wednesday is the first day of Lent.
Yes.
And there is a tradition of people going to a service and being anointed with ashes.
Yeah.
Is that from burning the palm crosses?
From last year, it can be, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Again, like so many of these things, potentially helpful, potentially unhelpful. Once you are doing something that's a ritual, you mustn't lose sight of why you're doing it.
Yeah. It's what it's pointing you towards.
It's what it's pointing you towards. Is always, and therefore, the more rituals you have, and the more complicated they get in their explanation, the less likely you are to understand what it is you're doing and why.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ash Wednesday, and then of course Monday, Thursdays in Lent.
Yeah, and we do.
We do Monday, Thursday service.
We've done quite a bit of that, haven't we?
Yeah, we do Monday, Thursday. Monday, Thursdays traditionally when you remember the Last Supper and so on and so forth. There's other Sundays, Palm Sunday still in Lent. Sometimes people will talk about the Passion Sunday. Have you come across that one?
Vaguely.
So that you can celebrate that. Well, you can do it on the Palm Sunday, or you can celebrate it the week before, when you particularly look to the cross.
Yes.
So there's lots. So you as I described it, and there's many more that I haven't mentioned. There are lots of things around Lent you can do, and I suppose because I'm a sort of slight pragmatist with these things, I've tended to pick the ones I think are helpful. So I've been big on preparation in Holy Week, in the sense that we've deliberately tried over the years to, as a congregation, spend some time in the gospel accounts of Jesus' death. Because the danger with them is that you can skirt through them very quickly. You can just try to sort of deal with Palm. You've got Palm Sunday where you deal with going into Jerusalem and you come to the resurrection and violence and stuff in between. This year we'll do slightly less because we've got Passion for Life mission, but we've done 2 or 3. We usually do Monday, Thursday, and Good Friday, and one other. And that gives, because we're talking 2 chapters, that allows us to go through in a bit of detail and to reflect. And those are different kinds of services. So in a sense, that's a kind of Lenten reflection. We've not tended to do quite so much at the start of Lent. The Lent groups that used to exist across the village have sort of, they folded with COVID really, I think. Various other factors there. Again, it's not, I'm not against it. It's just.
I think if we go, one of the other dynamics I think that was key in the establishment of the rhythms of the church, the life of churches, obviously all of them come before this, a physical book of the gospel, in the sense that if you understand the rhythms of the year and a very helpful way of teaching them to people, you will over that year and repeated understand the gospel. Jesus' life, his rhythm, his birth, his death, his presentation to the temple, all these things are in there. And if you walk through the year and you know that, it's a way of you knowing the gospel at a time where you didn't have access to a book. You couldn't just pick it up and read it.
So not, just to be clear on that, that's not that the Golden Bible wasn't written. It's just that
access to it.
It wasn't.
You didn't have
it's pre-printed. It's not.
You didn't have one in your home. You know exactly. And even in the early foundations of the church, it's still coming. You maybe have got Paul's letters.
So I mean, it's probably circulating by the first half of the 2nd century. Looking at what we know, but certainly it maybe not as one bound volume, but certainly in bits of the Old Testament's there the whole time. You're right, people's access to it. And I think the other thing about a lot of these festivals is that there's a link here between the church festivals and the agricultural year.
Yes.
And when the vast majority of people are either still involved in the agricultural year or very consciously dependent on it in a way we're not, Lent being at the time it is it kind of fits within this time of fasting. It's probably the point where the food started to run out for the previous year. But
you're waiting for the
first harvest. I mean, there's lots of those church year things that actually can fit very well into thinking about an agricultural year.
It's a better time to fast in the depths of winter when it's very cold.
Quite. So and Easter and spring and celebrating the celebration of your life, all those things do fit together. Obviously, you have to be in the Northern Hemisphere for that, but that's where Christianity was for most of the time.
And just also the point within that teaching is, it's actually remarkably effective at teaching all the ages, especially to young children, is to take the gospel stories and enact them, in the sense that all the kids at our schools know Christmas and know the nativity because they've embodied and lived it. And that's a very historically Jewish way of teaching. You see that right through the Old Testament, or the Jewish practice of, you gather everyone around, you retell the story, the Passover, the Exodus, those things, they are remembered in a way that I can teach my daughters the age that they are.
And there is explicit instructions in the account of the Passover and other accounts saying, teach your children, this is what you're to say to us. So that carries on to the New Testament again, that Paul's assumption in Ephesians 6 about fathers, that they will be teaching their children about the Lord. I think that there's something about that. I think the other thing that we do tend to do here that's kind of related is that normally at St. Albans, it's between Christmas and Easter when we spend our time in the Gospel. That is a deliberate placement in the sense that seems a particularly good time of year to be thinking about Jesus and who Jesus is. There are ways of considering, not quite a lecture, but how you think about this. It's about the first half of the year you spend time with Jesus through the events of his life, up to and including Pentecost. And in the second half of the year, like discipleship time, when we're thinking about the letters and stuff like that. And that's part of the rhythm of the year that I think is still worth taking advantage of where you can. Certainly, if people were sort of asked what are the Christian festivals, I think they would flag Easter.
Yep.
I think they would probably flag Christmas. They might flag Christmas second, in the sense that Christmas doesn't feel like a Christian festival, it's just a festival. But I suspect after that, it probably would be Lent. It would be something to do with Lent that would be the thing that people would have some awareness of.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what you're supposed to do for the rest of the year. Because you've got Christmas, Lent, Easter, just what?
Harvest.
Segregation.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
yeah. Well, I think you're right, James. It's helpful to have a time when you do sort of have more detailed and careful reflection on things. Like, I remember, I mean, it's a slight digress, but I remember there was one time at morning prayer. I came back after Christmas. I was somewhat surprised to discover that Luke's Gospel was still doing the Christmas story in January. And for a moment, I thought, has James lost the plot? But actually, and I think I said at the beginning, doing things sort of out of season
It can be
quite helpful. Because, as you were saying, you're not in that mad rush up to Christmas or up to Easter or whatever, and you can take time to look at it sort of out of season. That sort of reflection can be helpful.
Yes. And then I guess we should talk about like the fasting
that's
of it, and a strong church practice. We did a podcast on the last podcast was on finances, and there's a discipleship, and then also talking about fasting and it's a discipleship practice that has been in there and understanding it, and you already picked up on it. Like you go, someone's got, oh, I'm doing this, I'm giving up chocolate, and your question is why?
Oh, well, maybe, and also possibly looking at Luke 6, your question is why are you telling me?
Well, yes. explain that to someone who
right. So Luke, Matthew 6 anyway. Sorry, Mum. No, I took Luke. Matthew 6. I
shouldn't trust you as much.
No, you shouldn't. No, Sermon on the Mount. It's a deliberate call you out. Sermon on the Mount. So at the beginning of Matthew 6, Jesus talks about how to do things and how not to do things. It's got the Lord's Prayer in it. He talks about giving, interestingly. He talks about giving of alms, and he talks about fasting, he talks about praying. And in each three, he commends privacy or secrecy, not as in don't ever tell people, but you're not doing these things before men, you're doing them before God.
Yes.
So you're not giving alms, as in giving money in a way which is showing, not saying, look how much money I'm pouring to tell money. Here the coins,
this money to you.
Here the coins. Look at me. When you're praying, you're not praying in front of people so that they can see you're praying. And again, fasting, Jesus says, don't make it, don't make it look like you kind of,
I've not eaten.
I've not eaten, yeah. So that because actually it's a relational discipline about you and God. It's not about a public display of how holy you are. So I think that's quite interesting. I mean, it is. We're going to come to this later in the year when we look at prayer. We're going to look at that Matthew 6 passage in a bit more detail. And we'll look at sort of our evening services, because actually I think it really is interesting that those are the three spiritual practices, if you like, that get the idea of almsgiving as a spiritual practice would probably surprise something later, yes. But also the fact that fasting is in there. Again, if you go through the rest of the New Testament, it's a practice which is more assumed than taught upon. But there are times when people fast. I don't read it as being prescribed, but it is assumed to be part of spirituality.
Because our relationship to food is not an insignificant
area
of challenge.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, the most. If one of the things we have to watch out for as sinners is overindulgence, then food is an obvious area for that. Like any of these things, some of us will be more tempted than others, and food is complicated.
Yes.
So don't. It's not straightforward to look at a certain person and say, well, there's an overindulgent sinner, and to look at another person and say, well, they've got a fine relationship.
But that's what I mean.
Just you can't do it just by looking at someone.
Like anyone.
But definitely, food is going to be an area that it's going to be an area of discipleship, isn't it?
Yes.
I would look myself, and I honestly overindulge sometimes.
Well, in the same way, I get this to people. Look at me, and I've said it and talked about it, and then publicly, and they would kind of go, "Why why are you talking about that? If you ask Jasmine if I have an unhealthy relationship with chocolate, she will say yes, and it's bad. And I realised that I have used it to comfort you, use it to kind of do you know what I mean? And so you're right. It is not about the size of the person.
No, not at all. But it is about. It's going to be one of the. It's an area. Let's just put it. It's an area for discipleship, isn't it? And therefore, actually, fasting. Fasting is part of that. And again, no one is suggesting that a Lenten fast would be don't eat for 40 days.
No.
And actually, all the rules around fasting specify that you should be eating. And a lot of them would say, I think it's true, well, you know more about this than me, but I would think that a lot of them would sort of be about not eating during daylight or something like that.
There's certain things like that. There's
or more giving up particular things.
Yeah, and I think there's varies of it and similar to money. What is the situation? What is appropriate for you? What is the steps in the direction here? But also, okay, what is the primary cause? The primary reason for it is to humble ourselves.
Yeah.
Is to humble ourselves into relationship with God. The point of it is to make more of God and less of us. And one of the things it does, if you even tried it, or even just by force of a scenario, had to miss breakfast and second breakfast, just reading The Hobbit, is going just how much you go, oh my gosh, I'm much more fragile and weak.
I've got to eat for 2 hours.
I'm much more fragile and weak than I think I am. I think I'm this strong kind of person who could charge with it. But yet, if I haven't quite had enough tea, I start getting these headaches. I feel like I need to lie down in a dark room.
Angry, yeah. Well, look, and the reason that kind of advertising the work just because people relate to it, don't they? Yeah.
Well, as my father often said, he and I both come from the same hungry man is an angry man.
Yeah.
My mother was rather nice and not vigorous.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, isn't it? Because then you're into, well, what do I do about that? And I think probably most of the time the advice is just have something to eat. Because actually, but there might be times when you say, well, actually,
That's not okay.
why don't you try and find an appropriate time to tackle that? And I think that's changing. And I think, on this, we've had this conversation, and I think this is an area that requires a lot of thought. And look, I think it requires a lot of thought because I think as a culture, I think we're beginning to be aware that we have an unhealthy relationship with food. And by an unhealthy relationship with food, I don't mean we're all overeating.
Yes.
I mean we have an unhealthy relationship with food, generally, whether that's because it's so processed, or because of this, or because of that. Just generally, we're not
lost its spiritual significance.
Yeah, we're not culturally doing food very well.
Yes.
If you see what I mean. And again, we've in a weird kind of way not adjusted. You didn't used to have to think about food if you were 90% of the population, because you basically just ate it when it was available.
Yes.
Because you knew there would be times when it wouldn't be available, so you didn't worry. You just if there was food, you ate it.
Vegetables in season at certain times of the year.
But also just even like the harvest might be bad next year. Don't give us in the mail. Whereas obviously now our relationship is much more complicated. So this is a big area, and again, it's really interesting, isn't it? One of the things that Jesus says in those temptations, which we started with the 40 days of wilderness, man does not live by bread alone. Which we know it's true, but it's like, well, yeah, come on.
Yeah. Because it was changing. It was like, and there's another element of thankfulness within that. So I fasted the other day, and the first thing I had was a chocolate biscuit. It was the best chocolate biscuit I ever had in the world. I had another one the same a few days later.
Yeah,
Which means average. But it generates and we can get into that gratitude place of, even if you've got the practice of giving thanks before a meal, thank you for I eat, and you already are into it, or it's just a half thankfulness.
Let me finish my mouthful. So
God's goodness, His abundance, and the taste, and the joy, and the life.
Yeah, it's funny, some of the best liquid refreshments I've ever tasted is water. Because when you're thirsty,
You don't know
it tastes better. Yeah. It wasn't right. slightly fast walk. But, yeah.
I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah, he needs a biscuit.
Yeah.
This is
Come on.
Just finally, just one thing that part of the reason, because of that humility and because of that thankfulness, part of the reason of doing it, of having it done, set before you, is it actually works against that. Because otherwise, if I'm the one choosing when I fast and when I do that, it's a little bit of me rather than going, we fast at this time, we fast at Lent, or times in which it comes up within the church calendar, because that's what's given to me. It's not about me, it's not about how good I am, and turning it into, similar to prosperity gospel of finances, go, oh, I fasted now and I chose to do this, so God's going to give me what I want.
Because culturally you can get that kind of January fast do, can't you? Which is like it's probably quite good.
You make yourself bigger rather than actually.
It's about becoming fit, becoming self-realizing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. As in going, okay, this Lent, what are we doing? We are trying to reduce ourselves back a little bit, humble ourselves, realise the frailty within us, to allow God to become bigger and to become more important in our lives, and then to celebrate and to get through it and to feast.
So I think we'll come back to this conversation, which we've slightly got into, but we need to get to talk about fasting another time. But there we are. You know what to do in Lent now, James?
I do, yeah. Every day is a school day.
What do you like to that?
Yes.
Great.